Welcome to the Empowerment Show with Melissa Heisler. Every week, discover new personal choices with practical, inspiring guides. And now, here's Melissa.
Happy Tuesday, all, and welcome to the Empowerment Show. I'm Melissa Heisler, Empowerment Coach at It's My Life, and it is your life. Live it. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Debra Ruh. She is an advocate for people with disabilities. To join our conversation, you can post your questions at facebook.com/theempowermentshow. Our guest today is Debra Ruh, who is a global disability inclusion strategist. She's a seasoned entrepreneur, founding 3 firms, including Ruh Global, Tech Access, and Strategic Performance Solutions. She is a published author of Finding Your Voice by Using Social Media, and her second book, Uncovering Hidden Human Capital, How Leading Corporations Leverage Multiple Abilities in Their Workforce, will be published by the G3 ICT in the first quarter of 2014. Debra has also provided global leadership to governments and disability organizations all over the world, supporting research, outreach, policy, and standards initiatives with public and private sector. So welcome very much to the show, Debra.
Thank you for having me, Melissa.
Well, we're very excited to have you talk today. You're very, very involved with the world of disability inclusion. And my understanding is that this is important to you personally. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, my husband and I have 2 grown children, and our oldest is a girl, and she was born with Down syndrome. And the doctors did not realize that she had Down syndrome till she was 4 months old, and then such doom and gloom and tragedy. And I remember at the time being a little perplexed by the negative. I mean, nobody wants to hear that your child has Down syndrome, but the doom and gloom it really scared us as a family. They telling us she wouldn't walk, she wouldn't talk, and oh, be careful, she might get pregnant when she's 16, which, by the way, any girl could get pregnant around the age of 16. So not advice that's really very helpful to new parents that are just being given, a diagnosis that they don't really understand. So our daughter really has become the catalyst for the work that I do.
I was so taken by your story about how the doctors treated you, about comparing how this was better than having some other disability and making the wild assumptions. In your travels, have you found that many families have experienced the same thing?
I have found the stories are heartbreaking, and I understand the doctors are having to tell the parents that you don't have a, quote, normal child, but the way they deliver the news, it's so backwards, and you think, oh, well, it's because my daughter's 26 years old and they didn't know any better then, but I still hear the stories. I hear the stories all over the place, and disabilities is part of life. It's just part of the life, and if we all live long enough, you're going to experience disabilities in your life. And so I think there can be a much more enlightened way of, talking to parents, and the more positive ways of talking to the parents as well. And my heart sometimes goes out to the parents, that the mother that is told that she has a baby with disabilities right at birth, because I remember giving birth to both of my children and being pretty out of it. You had extra hormones zinging around. You had just gone through a pretty big thing giving birth, and I also, was on painkillers during the pregnancies. And so in a way, it was a blessing that I didn't have to have that conversation until our daughter was 4 months old. By that time, we had already fallen madly in love with our daughter, and so they could say whatever they wanted to say, and we didn't believe them, and we weren't going to buy it. So it's still a problem that happens over and over and over again all over the world, not just in the United States.
I love how you say that everyone will experience disabilities in their life, and I think that's very true, whether it's just aging or an accident that we go through, whether it's ourselves or someone we love. And I think there is, in our medical system right now, such a focus on the disease or the disability that we lose sight of the individual. And what I hear from you is that it's that focus on the individual that can bring the heart back and then can help us find solutions.
I know, because the reality is I don't think people are a mistake. And so Sarah, our daughter, I mean, she has an extra chromosome. And so depending upon what you believe, and I personally believe in God, and so are we saying that God made a mistake, that she's a tragedy? That's the way she was made. Now, of course, as we were just saying, as we live our lives, we acquire disabilities. Sometimes we acquire disabilities temporarily, and we move past them, and we move into it maybe in other ways. But it really is part of life. It isn't. It's what you do with what you're given, because we're all here living our lives and experiencing life. And so, once again, when they were telling us pretty much the way it was delivered, oh, doom and gloom, and you should be such tragedy, and you should be so heartbroken, instead of saying, well, you know, we're finding really amazing things. We're finding people that have Down syndrome that are living really incredible, impactful, powerful lives. And I know we don't want everybody to be Pollyannas, but at the same time, why does it have to be such a tragedy? And as you mentioned, I go all over the world working with countries and multinational corporations and associations about, you know, ways to properly include people with disabilities in every aspect of society. And in some countries, I just got back from Kenya, for example, people are still hiding their children with disabilities at home, and we're seeing it happen in some Middle Eastern countries and in Egypt and other places. And so there's some cultures believe that if you have a child that's born with a disability, something went wrong. Maybe you're being karmically punished or something. So we need to understand, once again, disabilities is part of life, and I don't think it's really appropriate for one group of people to decide another group of people are less because, for example, they have an extra chromosome.
As you were talking, the one thing that came to mind for me was I've always heard the story of people who have vision impairments, but then their hearing or their smelling abilities are so much more heightened than the rest of us. It's like, who decides that this is the way that everybody should be and that anything outside of this is therefore different and wrong? And so I think it's really looking at individuals differently and looking at what it is that they can bring to the table versus judging them on our preconceptions.
And I'd like to make 2 points with that, because that's brilliantly said, Melissa. And so 2 points, one about autism and one about supermodels. So when I went last week with my husband and my daughter Sarah, who once again was told she would never walk or talk, and yet now is speaking to audiences of 5,000 people at a time and walking with no problem. But when we were there doing the launch of the Dwarfism, the Association of Dwarfism in Kenya. And so we were invited on multiple programs, television, radio, newspaper, but there was this one really lovely program called The Churchill Show, very popular show in Kenya. And that night they also happened to have supermodels. These models, these women were gorgeous. They were tall women, 6 foot. Some of them, they had heels that were 3-4 inch heels. And then he also had the little people on there that I was with. So what was interesting was you had these tall, beautiful people, but these short, beautiful people as well. And I remember thinking, who decided that the models are the standards as opposed to the little people who are beautiful as well? We decided the models are beautiful instead of, it could have been the opposite. We could say, oh, my God, their freaks are so tall. Instead, society said, no, they're beautiful and amazing, and they are. But why do we say the little people are not beautiful and amazing as well? And the second point with autism, why do we get to decide that autism is a disability and bad? People with autism, their brain works differently, and there's major value to society for people with autism to be part of society because they think differently, so they're problem solvers. You don't want the brain that created a problem being the only brain that's trying to solve the problem.
And that's brilliantly said as well. I think what you're getting at, especially, I guess, with both of those examples, is that we need to be unique. I think that's one of the benefits that we bring to the world is our uniqueness. And trying to say that, we all have to be a 6-foot-tall supermodel and think logically and literally in a linear fashion, that who decides that that's the best way? And if that was the only way, we would only find one solution to things. We would only have one viewpoint on things. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this world is that there are how many billions of different viewpoints out there and different abilities and different things that we bring to the table.
Right. I bet when those beautiful supermodels were growing up and so much taller than their peers, I bet people made fun of them and gave them a really hard time. And then they grew up to these beautiful, beautiful people, and then we decided as society, we're now going to say they're the most beautiful people. Once again, they're beautiful, but it's so weird how we do things across the world, labeling people and deciding that they're good or they're not good.
Yes, and it's a lot of fun also to go to different countries. And I remember this when I did a tour of Europe, and some places like Paris, I'm under 5 feet tall and, not the supermodel, and so no one paid attention to me there. But there were other countries I went to, and then all of a sudden I was attractive.
Oh, I just think that's fascinating. I went to Kenya. A young woman traveled with me. Her name is Becky Curran, and Becky's a little person, and I'm not sure how tall she is, but she's a very, she's a little person, but she's a very attractive woman. And the men of Kenya just thought she was the prettiest thing they'd ever seen. She got multiple marriage proposals, which she didn't accept, but they everywhere we went, men, and you can tell the difference between somebody staring at you or somebody admiring you, and it was really amazing to watch the men of Kenya look at her with just awe. I thought that was so interesting, and I thought, wow, what can we learn from the men in Kenya? I was very impressed with that.
It's a beautiful story. I want to bring our conversation back around to your daughter, Sarah, because it was her experience, I believe in high school or her later last years of school, that they were thinking her stretch goal as far as a career would have been, a bagger, I think, at a grocery store? Right.
Or, and bringing shopping carts in from the mall. And that was when she was 13. We had just begun transition, and so the experts, all lovely people, we all got together at school, and they said, okay, well, at 13 years old, let's talk about what she's going to do for a living for the rest of her life, when she grows up. And that was what somebody mentioned, and I remember being just amazed that once again the bar was being set so low. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, what I can do is complain. I'm a good complainer. Or instead what I can do is I can try to be part of the solution. And so I decided to create a for-profit technology company here in the States that focused on employing people with disabilities. And we were a technology company that worked with the largest of the largest corporations, making sure that all their technology and their websites and everything was fully accessible. And so from that negative comment, a multi-million-dollar business was born, and, of course, a lot of work went into it. And over 80% of the workforce were people with disabilities. And in 2011, I merged that with another company, SSB Bart Group, that's in Northern Virginia, and then stepped back out on my own in 2013. But I still see, not only in the U.S., but all over the world, we are not really understanding the value of including people with disabilities in the workforce. And if people aren't working, people can't, they can't take care of themselves. They can't get transportation. The first thing anyone says to you when you meet generally is your name, and then what do you do for a living? So working and being part of the workforce is very important no matter what society you're in. It started with, once again, the bar being set so low for my daughter to me wanting to prove that people with disabilities add great value to the workforce. And And my daughter, once again, goes all over the world. We go all over the world speaking to audiences and consulting with audiences. And she also has worked at Nordstrom's, a wonderful store, for the last 7 years.
And I want to bring up one of the share on your website about from the World Health Organization that 1 in 7 people in the world have a disability. So I don't understand the disconnect with governments and companies ignoring such a large part of the population in either the workforce or being able to market to these individuals as part of our community. Do you know where that disconnect happens? Is it just not a community that's viewed?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why it's happening. I think most of it is misunderstandings, not really understanding what can and should be done. And some of it is the community ourselves going to employers and saying, you really need to hire people with disabilities, but then not bringing them qualified people with disabilities. So there's a lot of misinformation and finger-pointing going on around the world. And I think that there's an opportunity to really do things differently. Employers are already including people with disabilities in the workforce, but many people that have disabilities that are in the workforce, they don't self-identify. So there's a confusion. There's just a lot of confusion about this particular issue, which is one reason why I'm writing the book, because we've already had some successes, but if you're part of the community but you don't identify, and a lot of times disabilities are invisible or hidden disabilities, and so that 1 in 7, if you're not identifying as a person with a disability because maybe you think somebody will be prejudiced against you, or you won't be properly accommodated, or you won't be seen as somebody that should be promoted, there's a whole lot of different reasons why this is happening.
Why don't you get into that? Your book, Hidden Human Capital, How Leading Corporations Leverage Multiple Abilities in Their Workforce. Can you tell us some of the major points in there and maybe some things that either individuals or businesses can do to help bring this hidden human capital into the mainstream of the United States and beyond?
Well, what I decided to do when I decided to write this book, I found that I was being invited to all these countries, Egypt and Oman and Costa Rica, all of these countries all over the world, and they were asking me the same thing. How do we do a better job of including people with disabilities in the workforce? And the same questions kept coming up over and over again. So I thought, I need to write a book, but I need to write a book from the perspective of the employer. What are employers already doing that we can tap into and that we can learn from each other? What are different countries doing with this? The United States, we've done some amazing things, but we still have a long way to go when it comes to truly including people with disabilities in a meaningful way in the workforce, because people with disabilities are either unemployed or underemployed. And so I thought, if we start telling the success stories, and then tapping into that success stories, what do we have to do to make sure that our website and our career centers are accessible to people with disabilities, like a person that's blind, for example, that wants to submit a resume to your organization? What do you have to do? What do you have to do in the onboarding process? What do you have to do for an interview? What if somebody is deaf and they come in to interview with you? You've got to accommodate them, and don't decide that they're not going to add value to your workforce just because they're deaf, because that is absolutely not true. And so all the different moving pieces and the best practices of the companies that are already doing things, nobody's really written about it. There's been some white papers on it. But I think sort of a how-to, how do we begin, who's doing it right, and at the same time, Melissa, something that we must do, but people just don't understand. If you are a family that has somebody that you love with a disability, we have to educate ourselves. And if one company supports our community more than another company, we need to shop or purchase from that company, and we need to tell that company I am buying from you because you support people with disabilities. We have to vote with our wallets, but we have to tell these corporations why we're making the decisions. Nothing's going to change until the corporations really, really feel that we are a community that has a voice and will actually vote with our pocketbook. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but in a way it really does go back to what's the roadmap for getting there, no matter what country you're in.
I think that book is going to make so many changes in this world, and I love your final point about what we can do as consumers. And I think in this world right now, there are so many people that do feel powerless to make changes, whether it's the individuals that are in the workforce or whether it is about the foods we eat or other things that we think are beyond our control. But we're the ones spending money. And if we can tell corporations and businesses we're buying here and not there because of X, we can make changes.
Yeah, I think it's just so important. And social media is such a wonderful thing because you can actually go directly to the brand and tell them what you're thinking or what questions you have. When I was in Kenya, we missed our flight, and I was the agent was telling me I had to pay all these really, really high fees. And so I went right on social media and I started tweeting in a positive way with the airline saying, gosh, I really appreciate if y'all could do something for me. There was an accident, blah, blah, blah. Well, they reduced the fees by almost $1,200 that we were going to be charged. We were still charged some fees, but they were able to reduce it. And I know if I hadn't been positively chattering, saying, what can you do, how can you help me, it wouldn't have happened. So we can find a voice, but I believe that you do have to have a voice, a credible voice that isn't whiny and complaining all the time and sort of gives a break to both sides of the conversation. It's very exciting to see what social media is doing for us now and how we can find our voice.
And I love that you bring that as a positive voice, and I bring this up a lot as well. There's some beautiful people that I know who are very much evangelists. However, they seem to be always out for the fight. Yeah. And I believe if we use social media or if we use any other media or any other means to communicate, if we can consciously, calmly explain situations, explain options, make suggested solutions, that we can make much more of a difference. I mean, you had a $1,200 difference in that route. Here's another horrible airline that's doing X, which is not going to do anything except feed the hate and fear in the world.
Right. That's what I think too. And when they did it, when they did give us a break, I immediately rewarded them and started chattering and saying, "Gosh, I appreciate you working with us," and it becomes a person on the other end of that Twitter. And I think we forget that. But like you said very well, Melissa, that if we start out as always looking for a fight, I think people just don't hear us anymore and they just want us to go away. So I think you've got to tell the truth, but you've got to be part of the solution, not just part of the world sucks, the world's so terrible. Well, no, it's not. There's a great beauty in the world, but there's things that are wrong with the world too. So why don't we all work together and try to figure out the best way to support each other as we walk these walks together? It's about experiencing our life, and the name of your show, the Empowerment Show, I think is really beautiful because it could be about entitlement or it can be about empowerment, and it should be about empowerment.
It is definitely about empowerment, and it's about empowering individuals to do the right thing and say the right thing.
I agree.
And so we do only have a few minutes left here. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with the UN Convention of the Rights for People with Disabilities.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. The UN created the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and it's been signed and ratified by different countries all over the world, and the United States is in a pretty heated battle right now to ratify it here, and we're really hoping that they will ratify it here. But it's just a set of standards that of how you should treat your citizens with disabilities. It's sort of a civil rights Bible almost, You need to do this. You need to accommodate people. You need to make sure they're educated. You need to include them in the workforce. And you need to make sure that, technology is accessible and all the different moving parts that go with making sure that our disenfranchised members with disabilities are meaningfully included. And so I work a lot with G3ICT, which is a nonprofit that is sanctioned by the several United Nations agencies and supported by private and public members. And they go all over the world helping countries make sure that technology is fully accessible. For example, if a website don't have the graphics and the pictures tagged, a person that's using a screen reader that's blind won't be able to understand what that graphic is if it hasn't been described, or if you have some video that's not captioned, somebody that can't hear or is deaf, they're not going to be able to get the same experience that somebody that can hear it is going to have. So it's about the digital divide, making sure that technology is fully accessible to all of us so that we can all benefit from the digital age. So I love the work that G3ICT does, and so I volunteer with them. I do blogging for them, and I'm the chair of their Employability and Technology Committee, because I just really believe that together all of these moving parts need to be considered so that people can really embrace who they are and have the opportunities to grow no matter where they're located. And technology is a very good enabler if people can have access to it. But we got to make sure they have access to it, and sometimes often we forget to do that. I don't think developers ever intentionally leave out a person with a disability. I think a lot of times it doesn't occur to them to be sure all the graphics are tagged or to make sure any video that you're uploading to YouTube is captioned, because you can do that automatically with YouTube. But people, it's an awareness thing. They don't even think about it.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, I'm thinking, I do tag most of my pictures, but I never thought of it for that end user. I really thought it was more of a social media thing. But now knowing that it's really for those who cannot see the screen, I'm going to be much more descriptive as I put that in there.
Yep. It's really good for your search engine optimization, but it's critical to a person that's blind or has severe vision loss. Because, just because I'm blind or I have vision loss, I still want to participate in society. I still want to view a video. Oh, Deborah, you can't view a video, you're blind. No, that's not true. I can still experience it. Help me experience it. And even if I am not blind, when you put all that in there, you're going to make it even more meaningful to me. So it's about, experiencing it in the best way for you, no matter who you are.
Well, that's a very beautiful thought to end on, Deborah. We've flown through this half hour. It has been fabulous speaking with you. Your book, Hidden Human Capital, I know it comes out in the beginning of 2014. Is there a place where our listeners can receive a copy or get in on list to receive a copy in the future?
Yeah, if they want to go out to my website, which is www.ruhglobal.com, which is RUHglobal.com, or follow me on social media. I'm on most of the channels at Debra Ruh, DeBraruh. I can keep everybody informed. I'm working really hard on it, and I have wonderful people participating with it. I feel that it's going to be a powerful book, and I'm almost a little tiny intimidated by it because I feel like I have been blessed with being able to tell this important story, and I want to really do it justice. So I'm excited, and I've intimidated myself a little bit about it as well. But, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? One bite at a time.
Absolutely. And you are a wealth of knowledge. So I know that whatever it is that you come out with is going to be such a groundbreaking piece that's going to start up a whole new movement. So I'm really looking forward to seeing your book when it comes out.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for doing this show. And giving us voices. It's a really powerful thing that you're doing, and we need to help each other find our own path. So thank you for the show that you do.
Well, thank you, Debra, and thank you for sharing your words with us.
Thank you, Melissa.
Join Melissa Heisler next week right here at The Empowerment Show. Join the conversation at facebook.com/The Empowerment Show or twitter.com/Empowerment Show.